In other news, mixed messages from the US on Iran. Top diplomat Marco Rubio has just said they're still willing to negotiate, even if Tehran does not seem serious. Those remarks, however, come after President Donald Trump himself said they have no interest in meeting. Washington's bombardment has continued for 11 straight nights, with missile strikes near the Bushehr nuclear plant. Iran, on the other hand, continues to respond with retaliatory aerial assault on US assets in Jordan, Bahrain and Kuwait. The conflict still disrupting shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, sending Brent crude to its highest level in more than a month. Iran's military threatens to expand its strikes if Washington goes after sensitive sites such as nuclear facilities. Mr. Trump had threatened to bomb Iran's deeply buried Pickaxe Mountain facility.
They're in this because of nuclear weapons, and they're trying to possibly reconstitute a site. We'll hit that site. Any site where they're even thinking about nuclear, we'll be hitting it very, very powerfully.
And for more, Jagruti Dave is tracking developments for CNA live from Washington, D.C. Jagruti, it seems unclear if the negotiations will resume. What do you make of the conflicting messages from both Mr. Trump and his Secretary of State?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of conflicting messages from this administration throughout their operation in Iran, haven't we? And, most recently we've seen this escalation in strikes, yet messages from the US that it's willing to negotiate. We've seen the 11th day of consecutive strikes from the US now. And there are several reasons that perhaps you could attribute to these contradictions. One of those could be that this is a negotiating strategy on part of the United States to put pressure on Iran to get to the table, to get better terms for any deal that's made. One of the other reasons for the contradictions is that there's a deep distrust on both sides. Donald Trump has said the Iranians want to meet desperately to try to end the war, but then he said until they're ready to meet in a meaningful way, we have no interest. Iran also says it's willing to negotiate if it's in Iran's interests, and Iranian officials are in Pakistan to try to revive those peace talks. The second, and another reason is perhaps that the US is in a bit of a bind on whether to escalate or de-escalate. There's perhaps pressure on the US to retaliate hard following the recent loss of American lives, because the US Army has confirmed that a third service member is believed to have died in the attack on a base in Jordan. And then there's the bind over Hormuz. As Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, said at the ASEAN meeting in Manila, the US doesn't want Iran to have control over Hormuz, being able to exact tolls, for example. And this shows the leverage that Iran has over that waterway. And Rubio said that essentially it sets a dangerous precedent, perhaps with implications for other maritime conflicts or maritime regions in other parts of the world. And what Rubio said really reflects that bind, I think. Let's just take a listen.
But look, the president always prefers to negotiate and reach a deal on these things. And we're willing to do that. And we've tried to do that now for a year and a half, but we're also not going to sit by and let ships be blown up or Americans be attacked.
Now, Jagruti, you mentioned a big trust issue earlier. The US president has issued a lot of threats since the war began. How credible is this latest one when it comes to nuclear facilities?
Yes, President Trump has said the US plans to hit Pickaxe Mountain soon. This is the underground site near one of Iran's key uranium enrichment facilities. Iran state media has obviously said that that would be considered a major escalation. On the one hand, President Trump has made this threat before and hasn't done anything. On the other hand, it's also not clear whether there's anything significant in Pickaxe Mountain for Iran's nuclear activity yet, or whether Iran has plans to make it operational in the future. So these are considerations perhaps that the US is looking at. But the US has already struck nuclear facilities. Fordo, Natanz, for example, Isfahan last year. So perhaps this is a message that the US wants to send to Iran, that they're willing to escalate. Mediators, as I say, hope this is just rhetoric to put pressure on Iran for negotiations.
Jagruti, thank you so much for bringing us the latest. That was Jagruti Dave for CNA reporting from Washington, D.C.